The night shifts at Harper's Diner were usually dull, predictable. The same truckers, the same scattered regulars, the occasional lost traveler looking for a cup of coffee strong enough to keep them awake for the next 100 miles. It wasn't exciting work, but it was safe. Or at least, I used to think so. It was just past 1:30 a.m. on a Wednesday when I first saw him. The diner was mostly empty, save for a couple in a booth near the window and an old man nursing a cup of coffee at the counter. I was wiping down tables when I heard the door chime. The man who stepped inside didn't belong here. That much was obvious. He was too put together, too clean, too precise. He wore a dark gray suit, not overly expensive, but sharp, paired with a black overcoat. His shoes gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his posture was so straight it looked almost practiced. He wasn't like the usual customers who slumped in, tired and worn down by the road. He walked in with purpose. I greeted him casually, masking my unease, and he took a seat at the counter. "Coffee. Black," he said, voice calm, almost measured. I nodded and poured him a cup, but as I did, I noticed something strange. His hands. No rings, no scars, no calluses, just smooth, pale skin. He picked up the cup, but never drank, just held it like he was waiting for something. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. "You like working here?" The question caught me off guard. Not because it was odd, but because of the way he said it, like he already knew my answer. "Yeah, I guess," I shrugged, trying to keep it light. He gave a small smile, as if that answer amused him. "Ever think about doing something more?" It was an innocent enough question, but something about it sent a prickle down my spine. "I'm good where I am," I said, a little firmer this time. He nodded, taking that in, then finally lifted the cup to his lips, only to set it down without drinking. I turned to grab the coffee pot, but when I glanced back, he was already pulling out his wallet. He slid a $100 bill onto the counter. "For your time," he said, standing up. I hesitated. It was too much for a cup of untouched coffee. "Sir, this is..." But he was already heading for the door, leaving before I could protest. I should have forgotten about him. People leave big tips sometimes. Maybe he was just eccentric. Maybe he was just weird. But something about him stuck with me. And the feeling only grew worse when he came back a week later. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, tall, striking, with blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She was dressed in all white, a silk blouse tucked into tailored pants. She didn't look like she belonged here either. As they sat down, I noticed how her eyes never stayed still. She was scanning the diner. I walked over, keeping my expression neutral. "Back so soon?" The man smiled, but the woman answered instead. "You're even prettier than I remember," she said, voice warm, almost too friendly. Before I could react, she reached out and brushed her fingers lightly over my wrist. It was the briefest touch, but it sent a chill up my spine. I laughed awkwardly, stepping back slightly. "What can I get you two?" They ordered something simple, nothing strange. But as I poured their drinks, the woman started asking questions. "How long have you worked here? Are you from around here? Do you live alone?" That last one set off alarms in my head. I kept my answers short, vague. But every time I deflected, she would smile like she already knew the truth. Then she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "I run an exclusive club," she said, like it was some big secret. "We're always looking for people like you. Easy work. Fun. Safe. $15,000 for a weekend." I forced a small laugh. "That sounds too good to be true." "It's real," she insisted. "And it's by invitation only. You should come meet the others. We've got someone waiting outside who can explain it better." My stomach twisted. Someone waiting outside? My eyes flicked toward the window, but all I saw was darkness beyond the parking lot. I don't know why, but I knew if I stepped outside, I wouldn't be coming back. "I'm good," I said, my voice sharp this time. She studied me, her smile faltering just slightly. Then she glanced at the man beside her, and for a second, they exchanged a look. It wasn't annoyance. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Then, just like that, she pushed back from the counter and stood up. "Suit yourself," she said smoothly. They left without another word. For days after, I told myself it was nothing. Just some sketchy people with a weird business. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And then, a few nights later, I saw the car. Parked across the street, engine off. Just sitting there. I told myself it wasn't them, but my gut knew better. I closed up fast, heart hammering as I locked the doors and headed for my car. As I pulled onto the road, I checked my rearview mirror. The car followed. I turned. It turned. I sped up. So did they. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to think. Instead of heading home, I took a sharp right and pulled straight into the parking lot of a police station. The car slowed, then peeled away. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my whole body trembling. Whatever they wanted from me, they weren't done trying. And the worst part? I knew they'd be back. I didn't go home right away. I sat in the police station parking lot for a long time, my heart still hammering against my ribs. The air inside my car felt thick, suffocating, like something unseen was pressing against me. I tried to tell myself that I was safe here, that the car peeling away meant they had given up. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I didn't go to the cops. What could I even say? Someone in a car followed me for a few blocks before driving away? There was no crime. Nothing had actually happened. So, after convincing myself that I was just being paranoid, I finally started the engine and drove home. I spent the next few nights jumping at shadows. I kept the curtains closed, triple-checked the locks, and took different routes to and from work. But by the fourth night, with no sign of them, I started to relax. Maybe I had scared them off. Maybe they had just moved on to someone else. I even started feeling a little silly. And then, the phone call started. The diner's landline wasn't exactly busy in the middle of the night, so when it rang at 2:12 a.m., I jumped. I grabbed the receiver. Harper's Diner. Silence. Not the dead kind of silence you get from prank calls, but a breathing silence. Someone was there, listening. Hello. I tried again. Click. The next night, it happened again. Same time. Same silence. Then, on the third night, they finally spoke. You should have taken the offer. My blood ran ice cold. The voice was distorted, like it had been run through a cheap voice changer. My grip on the phone tightened. Who is this? Click. I told my boss everything the next day. He looked concerned, but also helpless. You want me to call the cops? And tell them what? I said, laughing bitterly. That some weirdo called and breathed into the phone? Then don't come in for a while, he offered. Take some time off. I wanted to, but something inside me, some deep, stubborn part of me, refused to be chased away. I decided to work my next shift. That was a mistake. It was another slow night. I kept glancing at the clock, willing time to move faster. It was just past 1:45 a.m. when the door chime rang. I knew before I even looked up. It was her, the woman in white. She walked in alone this time, no man by her side. She didn't go to a booth. She didn't take a seat at the counter. She just stood in the middle of the diner, staring at me. I swallowed hard. We're about to close. She smiled. It wasn't like before, forced and overly friendly. This one was empty, like a doll that had been taught how to mimic human expressions. I just wanted to see you one last time, she said softly. Her voice sent a cold ripple through my chest. What do you mean? The smile widened. It's already done. I didn't understand. Then, from somewhere far away, I heard my phone vibrating. I turned slowly, heart pounding. My bag was sitting on the back counter. I hadn't even realized I left my phone on silent. I stepped away from the counter, grabbed it with shaking fingers, and looked at the screen. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. For a moment, there was silence. Then, I told you, the distorted voice whispered, you should have taken the offer. And then, in the background of the call, I heard my front door unlock. My stomach dropped. I could hear it, the soft, deliberate turn of the deadbolt. I wasn't home, but someone was inside my apartment. I don't remember leaving the diner. 1 second, I was standing there, frozen, the woman still smiling at me from across the room. The next, I was in my car, speeding home. I don't even remember driving, just the sheer panic, the way my breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. My apartment complex loomed ahead. I parked recklessly, throwing the car into park and bolting out before the engine even stopped running. The front door was wide open, not kicked in, not broken, just open, like someone had casually walked inside. I reached into my bag, my fingers closing around the small pocket knife I always carried. Hard hammering, I stepped inside. It was quiet, too quiet. I moved through the space, checking the bedroom, the bathroom, the tiny kitchen. Nothing. Then I saw it. On my kitchen counter, sitting perfectly in the center, was a white envelope. It hadn't been there when I left for work. I stared at it for a long time before finally picking it up. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed. The timestamp in the corner read 3:12 a.m. Last night. I don't remember much after that. I know I called the cops. I know they searched my apartment, found nothing, told me I should stay with someone for a while. But they couldn't do anything else. There were no fingerprints, no sign of forced entry, and the locks, they weren't tampered with, which meant whoever took that picture, they had my key. I quit my job the next morning. I packed a duffel bag and left town. No notice, no forwarding address. I just got in my car and drove. I haven't been back. I haven't even checked my voicemail. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, when I'm staying in some new place, some new town, my phone will vibrate. I never answer, but I don't need to, because every time I check, it's the same thing. Unknown number. And a message. We'll find you again soon. Story 2. Working the graveyard shift at a gas station was never my dream job, but it paid the bills. The place was a small, rundown convenience store off a desolate stretch of highway, the kind of spot where you could go hours without a single customer. The only sounds were the distant hum of passing trucks, the occasional flicker of the old neon sign, and the monotonous buzz of the fridge motors. Most nights, I didn't mind the quiet, but sometimes the silence felt too heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. That night started like any other. It was just past 2:30 a.m., and I was leaning against the counter, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, half waiting for my shift to end. Outside, the parking lot was empty, the road beyond it swallowed by darkness. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement. Someone was standing near the pumps. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The station was brightly lit, but beyond the pumps, the world faded into an inky blackness. I squinted, trying to make sense of the figure. He was standing unnaturally still, his posture rigid, arms hanging loosely at his sides. No car, no movement, just standing there. I shifted uneasily. Maybe he was waiting for a ride. Maybe his car broke down. I watched for another minute, expecting him to walk toward the store, but he didn't. He just remained there, half hidden in the shadows, staring toward the station. A small shiver crawled up my spine. I turned away, forcing myself to focus on restocking the cigarette shelf behind the counter. But when I looked back at the window, he was gone. A cold prickle ran down my neck. I hadn't heard him leave. No footsteps, no sound of a car starting. Nothing. I swallowed hard and told myself I was overreacting. Probably just some drunk hitchhiker wandering too close before thinking better of it. I had seen plenty of weird people in the middle of the night. But something about him, about the way he stood so still, made my stomach feel tight. Still, the night dragged on. 3:15 a.m. No other customers. Just the hum of the fridge, the flickering neon light, the oppressive silence. And then, a soft tap on the glass. I jerked my head toward the door. The man was standing there, face just inches from the glass. I nearly dropped my phone. His hood was still up, but I could make out the lower half of his face. His skin was pale, lips slightly parted, revealing the hint of teeth. Not smiling, not frowning, just watching. I hesitated before forcing myself to step toward the door. I wasn't about to open it, but I had to do something. "You need something?" I called out. The man didn't answer. He just tilted his head slightly, like a confused dog. Then, without a word, he reached into his hoodie pocket. My stomach clenched. I took a small step back, hand instinctively moving toward the baseball bat we kept under the counter. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a phone and held it up to the glass. The screen was pitch black. At first, I thought maybe he was showing me something, but then, the screen flickered. A video started playing. It was footage of me, not from the store's cameras, not from a security feed. It was taken from outside, through the window, and it was from tonight. I stopped breathing. I watched myself on the screen, standing at the counter, scrolling through my phone just minutes ago. The camera angle was low, like it had been filmed from the pavement near the pumps. A horrible realization crept into my bones. He had been watching me long before I noticed him. I swallowed, my throat dry. I should have called the cops. Should have locked the door. Should have done something. But I just stood there, every muscle in my body locking in place as my brain struggled to process what was happening. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he turned and walked away. Not toward the road, not toward a car, just into the darkness. And then, as if the universe was mocking me, the power went out. The store plunged into darkness. The hum of the fridges died instantly. The neon sign flickered once, twice, then snapped off. Even the emergency lights, the ones that weren't supposed to fail, blinked and sputtered into nothingness. I was left standing there in absolute blackness, the silence so thick I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. I fumbled for my phone, my hand shaking as I flicked on the flashlight. A weak, bluish glow illuminated the counter. My breath came in sharp gasps as I moved toward the backup generator switch in the storage room. That's when I heard it. A sound from the back of the store. Something shifted in the aisles. A soft rustling, like fabric brushing against shelves. Someone was inside. My breath hitched. I hadn't heard the door chime. There was no way anyone could have walked in without me noticing, which meant they had already been here. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The darkness pressed in around me, and the faint beam of my phone's flashlight wasn't nearly enough to see past the aisles. Then, a whisper, right by the refrigerators. Low, garbled, almost like someone was speaking through static. I gripped the bat tighter, my knuckles turning white. I forced myself to step forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. My flashlight barely reached the back wall, the rows of shelves casting long, unnatural shadows. Another whisper. And then, from somewhere inside the store, my phone vibrated. My real phone. The one still sitting behind the counter. Someone was calling me. I sucked in a sharp breath, my body frozen in place. My flashlight beam wavered. I turned, slowly, and started moving back toward the counter. VRRR. VRRR. The screen was glowing in the darkness, the name flashing. Unknown caller. I swallowed hard, staring at it for what felt like an eternity. And then, as if on autopilot, my hand reached out. I answered. The line crackled. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice. Deep. Distorted. Like it was coming from a broken speaker. You shouldn't have looked outside. A breathless pause. Now we're inside. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the counter, the screen still glowing in the pitch-black store. My breath caught in my throat as I took a step back, my phone's flashlight casting long, unnatural shadows against the aisles. I wanted to believe it was a prank, someone messing with me, some drunk hitchhiker with too much time on their hands. But I knew better, because I could still hear the whispering. Not from the phone, from inside the store. I clenched the baseball bat so tightly my fingers ached. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything except that soft rustling. Someone was moving. I forced myself to step forward, shining my flashlight into the aisles. The shelves cast jagged shadows, stretching like fingers against the floor. My throat was dry, my breath shallow. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate scrape, like something dragging across the floor. I whipped the flashlight toward the sound, my heart slamming against my ribs. Nothing. Just the empty snack aisle. I swallowed hard, forcing down the rising panic. It had to be my imagination. The power outage, the man at the window, the phone call, it was messing with my head. But then, something moved at the edge of my vision. A shape, low to the ground, and fast. I barely had time to react before something darted between the shelves, vanishing into the darkness. My stomach knotted. That wasn't a person. It was too low, too fast. My breath came in quick, uneven bursts. My instinct screamed at me to run, to get the hell out of there. But my feet stayed planted. Then, another vibration. My phone was ringing again. The screen still glowed from where I had dropped it on the counter, the words flashing. Unknown caller. I didn't answer this time. I just watched as the call went to voicemail. A second later, a new message. I hesitated, then picked up the phone, my hands trembling. With shaky fingers, I pressed play. At first, it was just breathing. Slow, rhythmic. Then, something worse. My own voice. A recording of me taken from earlier in the night. I heard myself humming absently, the faint sound of my fingers tapping against the counter. A sound from before I had even seen the man at the pump. Which meant they had been watching me long before I noticed them. I lost it. I bolted for the emergency exit at the back, my legs moving on pure adrenaline. I didn't care about the cameras. I didn't care about my job. I just needed to get out. I pushed through the back door, nearly tripping over myself as I stumbled into the night air. My breath was ragged, my chest heaving. The cool air hit my skin like a slap, my mind racing in 1,000 directions. I was about to start running when I saw them. 3 figures stood at the edge of the parking lot, perfectly still, watching. They weren't moving, weren't speaking, just standing there, barely illuminated by the glow of the gas station sign. My entire body locked up. One of them lifted a phone. The screen flashed, and my own face stared back at me. They had taken another picture, just now, from behind me, which meant there was someone else still inside the store. I didn't stop to think. I turned and ran. I didn't care where. I just needed distance. I sprinted across the parking lot, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I heard footsteps, but I didn't look back. I reached the highway, the asphalt stretching endlessly in both directions. The nearest town was miles away, but I wasn't staying here. Then, headlights. A car was approaching from the distance. I ran straight into the road, waving my arms like a madman. The vehicle slowed. For one horrible second, I thought it was them, that I had just flagged down another one of them. But as the car pulled up, I saw an older man behind the wheel, his face twisted in concern. "What the hell are you doing out here?" he called, rolling down the window. I didn't hesitate. "Please," I gasped. Just get me out of here." The man studied me for a second, then nodded. "Get in." We drove in silence for a long time. My pulse was still racing, my hands clammy. Every few seconds, I glanced at the side mirrors, expecting to see headlights following us. But the road behind us was empty. After a while, the man spoke. "You from around here?" I shook my head. "No, I was just working at the gas station." "The one back there?" he asked, frowning. "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. Then, with a slow, measured voice, he asked, "How long you been working there?" I hesitated. "Couple months." "What?" His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Kid, that place hasn't been open in over a year." The world tilted. I let out a shaky laugh. That's not possible. I've been working there every night." "I don't know what to tell you," the man said, his voice grim. "That place shut down last August. A worker went missing. They never found him." The blood drained from my face. My mind whirled, trying to make sense of it. The paychecks, the customers, the routine. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I never met the manager. My paychecks were always direct deposits. No office, no HR. And the customers? Now that I really thought about it, I couldn't remember any of their faces. I had been showing up to an empty building, talking to ghosts. The people outside, the ones watching me. Had they been trying to warn me? Or had they been waiting for me to realize it? I haven't been back since that night. I don't know what the truth is, or how long I had been working a job that didn't exist. All I know is, sometimes, when I check my phone at night, I see new messages. No number, no sender, just one image every time. A photo of me, standing behind the counter of a dark, abandoned store. Smiling, like I still work there, like I never left. Story 3. I never believed in bad omens. Not really. Not in the way superstitious people do, anyway. But after what happened during my final night shift, I think some places are just wrong. Like a wound that never heals, something infected, something that never quite lets go of the past. I used to work nights at a 24-hour superstore, one of those massive retail chains that sold everything from clothes to groceries to auto parts. The kind of place that had more cameras than employees, but still somehow managed to feel empty at night. And that night, the night it all happened, the store was practically deserted. It started with the mirrors. I was stocking shelves in aisle 17, household goods, when I saw the movement. A flash of motion in my peripheral vision. I turned, heart kicking up a notch. Nothing, just my own reflection in one of the small, cheap vanity mirrors we sold. I exhaled, laughing softly at myself. "Get it together," I muttered under my breath. I reached for another box, setting it down next to the display. And then, as I glanced back at the mirror, my reflection didn't move. I froze. I was standing sideways, facing the shelf. But the reflection of me, it was still looking forward, at me. My lungs locked up. A cold, twisting sensation slithered down my spine, every instinct in my body screaming wrong, wrong, wrong. Then, just as suddenly, my reflection snapped back into place. Like nothing had happened. I staggered backward, heart hammering. I reached out a shaky hand and touched the glass. My reflection did the same. Normal. Perfectly in sync. I forced a breath. "Just your imagination," I muttered. But I knew. I knew what I saw. And the night was just getting started. By 1:45 a.m., I had mostly shaken it off. I convinced myself that I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. The store was quiet, aside from the distant hum of the refrigerators in the frozen food section and the faint crackle of the overhead speakers playing some distorted, slow version of a pop song from years ago. I was pushing a cart full of restocks toward the next aisle when I noticed something odd. A shopping cart, just sitting in the middle of the main walkway, half filled with random items. I frowned. There were no customers in this section, and none of my coworkers had been working over here. I glanced down at the contents. A pack of razors, a bottle of bleach, some zip ties. Something about the combination made my stomach tighten. It wasn't illegal to buy those things together, but it felt off, like a shopping list for something bad. Still, I sighed and pushed it aside. Probably just someone messing around, right? But as I walked away, I heard it. The wheels creaking. I turned back. The cart was moving, rolling toward me. Slowly, deliberately. I stared, rooted in place as it inched forward, the wheels rattling softly against the linoleum floor. There was no slope, no wind, nothing that should have made it move. And yet, it did. I backed up fast, nearly knocking into the shelf behind me. The moment my foot hit the tile, the cart stopped. I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the damn thing. And then, my radio crackled. A burst of static, sharp and sudden, filled the quiet air. Then a voice. A whisper. Right against my ear. Don't turn around. My stomach dropped. The voice was not one of my coworkers. And it was right behind me. I couldn't breathe. The radio crackled again, static swallowing the last remnants of the whisper, like it had never been there at all. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me, I turned my head. Nothing. No one was there. The aisle was empty. My mind reeled. Maybe it was interference? Some random radio pickup? Except, the voice had been right in my ear. Not distant, not fuzzy. Like someone had been standing behind me. I gripped the cart, my knuckles turning white. I needed to go. I turned the corner, heading straight for the stockroom. I wasn't about to be alone on the floor anymore. But the moment I stepped past aisle 9, I saw it. A woman, standing at the end of the frozen foods section, half hidden behind one of the freezers. She wasn't shopping. She wasn't moving. She was staring at me. Her clothes were all wrong, thin, pale fabric that looked like it belonged in another decade. And her face. It wasn't blurry, exactly, but my brain couldn't seem to process the details. Like my eyes just refused to focus on it. My stomach twisted. I should have gone straight to the stockroom. I should have ignored her. But something about her expression, that hollow, vacant watching, kept me frozen in place. And then she took a step forward. A slow, unnatural step. Like her body was remembering how to move. And then another. And another. I ran. I tore through the aisles, my breath ragged. I didn't stop until I reached the employee break room, slamming the door behind me. I wasn't alone. Danny, one of the other night shift workers, was inside, sipping a soda and watching something on his phone. He looked up, startled. Dude, what the hell? I sucked in air, trying to slow my racing heart. Did you see her? Danny frowned. See who? I turned, half expecting to see her in the hallway. But there was nothing. No sign of her. No footsteps. No lingering presence. Like she had never been there at all. I tried to calm down, tried to tell myself that I imagined it, that my brain was playing tricks on me. But then Danny's phone vibrated. A text. From an unknown number. I saw the words over his shoulder. You left the card in the wrong aisle. Danny blinked. What the? Before he could finish, the break room TV flickered on by itself. The screen filled with grainy, black and white footage. I knew what it was before I even recognized it. It was a live feed. From the security cameras. And on the screen, standing in the middle of the empty store, was the woman, facing the camera, smiling. And then, as we stared in horror, she turned her head, like she could see us watching her, like she knew exactly where we were. And then, the power cut out. The power cut out completely. The break room plunged into darkness. The only sound was the soft, distant hum of the refrigerator shutting off, the world outside the door collapsing into an unnatural silence. Then, a whisper. Not from Danny. Not from me. But from the TV screen, still glowing weakly in the dark. I turned, pulse slamming in my ears, just in time to see the woman's face. Close. Too close. Her head filled the entire screen, grainy and wrong, her mouth slightly parted like she was trying to speak. Static swallowed the room. And then, the screen shut off. Danny swore, fumbling for his phone flashlight. What the hell was that? He hissed, his voice tight with panic. I couldn't answer. My entire body felt locked in place, like I was balancing on the edge of something unfathomably deep. Something was wrong. More than wrong. I could still feel her. She was here, watching, waiting. I forced myself to move, reaching for my own phone. No signal. I turned to Danny, whose face had gone pale in the glow of his screen. "There's someone in the store," I whispered. Danny swallowed hard. I know." We stood there for a moment, neither of us moving. Then, from outside the break room, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the back exit, toward the emergency door that led straight to the loading dock. But before we could move, the footsteps stopped. And then, a knock, right outside the break room door. Soft, rhythmic, like someone who already knew we were there. Danny squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This isn't." The knock came again. 3 taps, then silence. And then, the door handle turned. I didn't wait. I grabbed Danny and yanked him toward the emergency exit. Not even thinking, just moving, my body reacting on pure adrenaline. The metal door groaned as I pushed through, the cold night air hitting my skin like a slap. We stumbled into the back lot, where the only light came from a dim, flickering street lamp above the loading dock. Danny gasped, doubling over, hands on his knees. "Oh my God, oh my God." I turned, expecting the door to burst open behind us, expecting her to follow. But the door remained shut, and that was almost worse, because it meant she wasn't chasing us. She wanted us to leave. I dug my phone out of my pocket, hands shaking. Still no signal. Danny straightened up, still breathing hard. "We have to call the cops." I nodded, but I already knew they wouldn't believe us. What the hell were we supposed to say? That a woman from the security cameras was inside the store? That she wasn't human? Then a noise. Not from inside the store. From the parking lot. Both of us turned. A car was parked at the far end of the lot, just beyond the reach of the streetlights. The headlights were off. The engine was silent, but it hadn't been there before. And then, as we watched, the driver's side door opened. Someone stepped out. Not her. A man. Tall. Dressed in dark clothing. Face obscured by the shadows. Danny tensed beside me. "Dude, we need to go." But I couldn't move, because something about the man felt wrong, too. Like he wasn't really there. Like he was just another part of whatever this was. Then, he raised his hand. And in his hand, he was holding my ID badge. My stomach flipped. Danny cursed under his breath. Nope, we're leaving." I barely registered him grabbing my arm, yanking me toward the opposite end of the lot. But the moment we turned, another car. Same model. Same dark silhouette of a man standing beside it. And another. And another. Lining the edge of the lot like a barricade. All of them standing perfectly still. All of them holding something of mine. My keys. My wallet. Even my spare uniform shirt, the one I had left in my locker inside the break room. Danny and I stumbled back, pressed against the metal siding of the store, our breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. "This isn't happening," Danny whispered. This is some kind of joke, right?" I couldn't answer. I was too busy staring at the store, at the break room window, where she was standing, watching us, smiling. And then, she lifted her hand, pointed at me, and the men in the parking lot started walking. We ran. There was no thought, only pure terror. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't care. All I knew was that I needed to get as far away from that store, from them, as possible. We sprinted across the lot, toward the highway. The moment we hit the road, a truck's headlights appeared in the distance. I didn't even hesitate. I threw myself into the street, waving my arms frantically, hoping, praying that the driver wouldn't just barrel past. The brakes screeched. The truck slowed. Danny and I stumbled toward the door as it swung open, revealing a middle-aged trucker with a stunned expression. "What the hell? Drive," I gasped. Now, something in my face must have convinced him, because he didn't argue. He just threw the truck into gear. And as we pulled away, I looked back one last time. The parking lot was empty. No men, no cars, no woman. Like none of it had ever happened. We never went back. The cops didn't believe us. The security footage? Completely wiped. No evidence. No sign of the woman. Just static. And the next night, the store was open like nothing ever happened. Like it had forgotten. But I hadn't. And neither had Danny. And sometimes, late at night, when I check my phone, there's a text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You left something behind."